Yo, what's up, guys? Nostalgiaverse back once again, and today I just want to go over another theory. And I don't even know how many of you consider it a theory at this point, but I have strongly been under the belief that Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy is a reimagining and not a sequel. And I know it's a very mainstream belief that it is a sequel, and it has been. A lot of the biggest content creators in our community and outside of it have pretty much, subscribed to that theory, and some of it even take it as like a fact now. And I've always had contention with that. I could see where people would think that the way things are presented, it's not one-to-one with OG. They've made some different choices, but the OG events still continue to happen, and that is one of the main reasons that I personally believe it's a reimagining. Is it really? I don't know. I strongly believe it is, though, and others strongly believe it's a sequel. So there's plenty of those sequel theorists out there who give their reasons why they believe it's a sequel, and I would just like to put my ideas out there about why it's not. You can all disagree, or you can, agree, disagree. It's whatever. I just want to get my ideas out there, and so you guys can see where I'm coming from. And I got a whole thread. It's an older thread on Twitter where I collected a bunch of those tidbits from interviews that basically go over it. And it's not everything. There is a bunch of interviews out there. I tried scouring the internet for a lot of older interviews, but they are not easy to find. And even stuff from Square Enix directly on their blogs, it's not easy to track it down on their main site or through Google. So I'm going to stick with the quotes I got now, the snippets, because I believe this is anytime I ever saw something that was related to it, I snipped it out and posted it here in this thread. And I haven't really updated it since after the release of Rebirth, so if any new interviews have came out since then talking about it, those won't be included here. I got some just before Rebirth released interviews in here, but yeah, since Rebirth released, I don't have any of the newest stuff, if they've even done any. I need to go scouring for that stuff, but from what I can gather, they really haven't had any crazy post-release interviews. So I just want to go over some of this stuff with you, explain to you where I'm coming from, why I believe it's a reimagining, why it's easly believed to be a sequel, and I don't blame anyone for that. And if you still do believe it's a sequel, that's fine. I'm not saying you're wrong. Part 3 comes out, it could surprise all of us, and I'm not completely against the idea of it being a sequel. I just don't like the idea of more convolution. The way I see it is Final Fantasy VII, the original, is its own continuity, and the compilation is a separate continuity. And then I want to believe that Remake is the compilation version of the OG events that will fit in between Crisis Core and Advent Children and just make everything make more sense, unlike the OG could, because it was made before the compilation was even a thing, before all those retcons were introduced and all the compilation characters and all the lore behind it. But that's all intertwined within Remake, and then we got some new lore like with the Gi and things like that. So I would just really like to believe that this is the compilations version of Final Fantasy VII, and that it's going to be cohesive with the rest of the compilation, unlike the original. I want cohesiveness, everything wrapped in a nice neat bow. I would rather have that than a sequel that's taking place after Advent Children or Dirge of Cerberus or something like that. But I will get down to why. I believe even if Sephiroth does have knowledge or anything like that from Advent Children, that it's still not proof that it's a sequel. But I will get that all my main stuff out towards the end. Right now I want to go over these interview snippets, and we will discuss them, and then at the end I will give my just unedited thoughts, just shooting stuff out there about why I believe that myself, without these quotes, that this is the direction they're going in. But let's just take a look at some of these, and they're all out of order, so it's going to be a nice little randomized box of quotes, so just stick with me. So let's see, what new story elements can we expect from the game? As with Final Fantasy VII Remake, we have been careful to maintain the storyline from the original game while at the same time adding extra story content to flesh it out as a remake. In addition to the main story, there has also been a huge amount of new side content added, and you can expect to see new story told through that as well. Yep, well, that's pretty straightforward. So, moving on, I think this is one of the ones that was like right before Rebirth released. So let's see, IGN asked, so from the preview session, it was very clear that although the path is familiar, there are slight changes. For example, the way that Yuffie is introduced to the party. Can we expect to see more moments like this that subvert the expectations of the players who know the past story? And Katase says, okay, so to comment on sort of the difference from the original work, one point being that the order of events of the storyline may differ from the original. Some may appear or some way than what happens in the original, but overall Rebirth will tell the story to the Forgotten Capital sequence and overall follow the original story. But as far as how characters join the party, like with Yuffie, as you mentioned, has been reimagined in a way that's sort of better suited for the modern audience. Furthermore, as you know, within the original Final Fantasy VII, the character Zack Fair is one that doesn't appear as much in the original title. However, we see at the end of Remake that he has appeared, which is quite a difference from the original title. And as for Rebirth, there will be a new episode with Zack that will contain even more of him than Remake. I'm not able to say much more than this, as I would like for players to play and experience this with their own hands. And like the like Yuffie stuff, like that's like, we're not having optional characters. She was optional in the original. We're not having optional characters in this, in this modern game, basically. And she's like incorporated into the story. And I think even if this wasn't a sequel, people would have, like, you know what I mean? Like, even if there wasn't even a notion that it could have been, it could be a sequel or anything like that, like people would still think that Yuffie and Vincent are going to be actually incorporated into the story now. So that's nothing new. And we'll see in other interviews that the reason they changed some locations around, like we didn't go to Rocket Town or Wutai in Rebirth, this was to support the trilogy structure. Like they kind of want to like have like each game have like a good amount of content in it, and it didn't really like break anything from the OG story or anything to do with the way that they did. So like OG events still played out. I'm just interested in the next game, if they're like what they're going to do, like, because I don't think we're going to start out like going to Iciclin and the Gaia Cliffs and stuff like that. I know you're going to head north. Maybe something goes wrong with the Tiny Bronco again. You need to stop at Rocket Town, and then you do Rocket Town, and then on your way to the north from Rocket Town, you go to Wutai before you do that. That's my guess, but because I would think we would go to these places before Meteor's summoned and then after Meteor's summoned. So, but that's my take on that. Anyway, moving on. As you make these changes, I feel like it walks a fine line between for fans who want to see a faithful retelling versus the new changes and new story that you're telling. So how do you balance making those changes, and how much of the story is focused on subverting expectations for the fans of the original as opposed to a faithful retelling? Ase says, I do believe that, and with Remake as well, we were able to tell the story and to express ourselves in a new way that doesn't stray or defy the expectations of those who are fans of the original title. And so in terms of, the question of balance, I do believe that good balance between the two was maintained for Rebirth as well. That being said, while the story that we follow is quite faithful to the original, as you've seen in the demo as well, in part 1 with the story of Cloud and Sephiroth and their journey at Mount Nibel, you see that it has been greatly kind of enhanced and improved upon the original, whereas there's sort of a limitation based on the technology of the time, whereas now we have just this much more like enhanced immersive experience with the voice acting that just adds another layer to these characters, the stunning visuals and the acting of the characters that just show much more. So we have sort of the game or same episode that is now retold and invokes a new feeling, like a new deeper feeling within the players. And yeah, a lot of that's just going over like, hey, like the same thing, just enhanced technology, voice acting, and like just more dramatic, I guess I should say, just more of like a showcase. So and they not string or define the expectations of those who are fans of the original title. Like so far all of the story beats have like remained the same. Like no matter, I'll always say this, no matter what new has been introduced, including the whispers or anything like that, you know, we went through a wall of fate at the end of Remake. Like, people were expecting like, oh, the story's gonna go completely off the rails, but everything that's happened has actually led into those OG events continuing to happen instead of like stopping them from happening. So like this is just like a reimagining, like a new way to tell that story, pretty much like a new coat of paint on like, you know, an old painting. So let me see here. I just want to stop over to this real quick because I think this is important too, about why Sephiroth appears earlier in Final Fantasy VII Remake than he did in the original. And this is also to associate with the trilogy structure, you know, wanting to, you know, they didn't want to have a game with like basically no Sephiroth in it. So Sephiroth appears in Final Fantasy VII Remake much earlier than he does in the original game. Why did you make the decision to introduce him here? There are two main reasons. Firstly, the way we handled Sephiroth in the original Final Fantasy VII was to hide him, hold him back. You may not know this, but I was inspired by the movie Jaws, which took a similar approach of teasing this powerful presence, but never fully showing you the shark until later in the story. We wanted to build him up as this really big, powerful character in people's minds by only referring to him indirectly, and created this feeling of fear and oppression, so when he makes his first appearance, it's a big deal. But for the remake, that doesn't work so well, partly because everybody knows who Sephiroth is. We didn't think it would be as effective to have him held back until later on in the story. Secondly, Sephiroth is this massively overarching presence that looms over the whole Final Fantasy VII saga. We wanted to make sure that aspect of him was present in the first game of the project. That's why we have introduced him much earlier in the story now. So yeah, like, the reason for Sephiroth's early appearance, I know like a lot of people think like, you know, this is weird, why is he here? Like, you know, like this is like Advent Children Sephiroth coming back and he's like remaking the timeline. And like, you know, there was that statement like, oh, there's another meaning behind the word remake, and people thought, oh, remaking the timeline. But as you'll see in the quotes I'm about to get to in a little bit, like that's not what the meaning meant. It just meant like, you know, like basically like reimagining, and you'll see. But let's keep moving through these quotes over here. Let's see what's next. So the new trailer showed us a lot of scenes that fans were hoping to see in the game, but you said in the past that the order of scenes and locations that people will see and visit is different this time around from the original. Does that mean there are some things that people might expect to see in Rebirth that won't be here yet, or will be saved for the next game? The section of the original Final Fantasy VII story that Rebirth tells goes up to the Forgotten Capital, and certainly there are a number of locations on the way between the end of Midgar and when they reach the Forgotten Capital that have been kind of taken away and will be removed from this part of the story and be shifted and featured in the third part of the trilogy. So in that sense, there is a bit of a switching around, and some of the locations will be featured later on in the series than they were in the original. Having said that, we played close attention and we know what the fans want to see in this. All the locations you visited, all of those famous scenes, all of those great moments that people remember from when they played the original are still there. Are all there. They've all been updated and work really well in a modern presentation, so we paid a lot of care and attention to make sure people won't be disappointed, so all the really great scenes they want to see will be there. So like I've said this in the past, like, you know, like they're like, I don't understand how like we're gonna see every single event that we loved as like, well, me for since I was a child, like, because that's one of the reasons I wanted to remake originally. Like back then when graphics were really shitty, it was like, yeah, I wanted to remake when the PS2 was out after Final Fantasy X. I'm like, I want 7 in these graphics because I just want to see it with voice acting and a fresh coat of paint. But like, yeah, obviously that's turned into much more than that with Remake now on the PS5, you know, PS4 and PS5 and stuff like that. But yeah, like how are they going to keep doing that if, you know, people are expecting this big, oh, it's going to go completely off the rails moment? Like all the OG events are still going to happen, and everything that has happened, like all the newly introduced stuff, like I said, even the whispers or whatever, it's still leading into those moments. It is not departing from them. So, you know, it wouldn't make sense for it to be a sequel. I feel like, I just personally feel like it would be a crappy sequel if like it still went through all of these events that we know and love. Like if it was a true sequel, then it would break off at some point and the stuff would cease to happen. I mean, I don't think they're going to do some like last 10 minutes of part 3, like, aha, gotcha, Sephiroth's actually from the future traveling around in time, and like I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I know some people believe that, and I'm not like knocking them at all. Like, I understand the sequel theory, and I'm not saying it's a terrible theory. It is like the most held up theory next to its reimagining. Like, those are the two theories that are like combating with each other. So it's like the two most well-known theories for good reason, because they both have, you know, like some weight to them. But like when it comes to the reimagining one, there's also, you know, there's dev quotes to disprove the sequel stuff. But, you know, some people are like, well, the OG events can still happen because it's not exactly a sequel, it's a requel. And I'm like, that makes no sense to me as well. But those are just my thoughts. But moving on, more quotes. So to finish up, do you have any clues for why this game is called Rebirth? Here we go. So for this, with the last title, Remake, we were thinking of the concept of recreating or reimagining. And so Remake was the title that we chose, and sort of in line with this, Rebirth was thought of as the next iteration that also kind of encapsulates this sentiment of reimagining or recreating. So see, like, this is, you know, like people were going nuts, like, oh, you know, back when the first Ultimania came out, like, first Nomura said this is the 5th installment in the compilation, and then people were like, mean, like, that's a sequel, it's the 5th installment. And then I had to go through the timeline of showing people that, like, the compilation did not like release in chronological order, so that's nothing to go by. Like, I think like one of the games, like, it was either Dirge of Cerberus or Advent Children came out like before Crisis Core, and like they were just, you know, like before Crisis, like they were all like mixed up, jumbled. It wasn't like in chronological order when they released of, you know, like the events. So that's like nothing to go by. And then afterwards he's like, there's another meaning behind Remake, but I can't really like reveal it at this moment. And then it turned out like there's more than just this quote I have. There's more quotes of them reiterating that, like, the, you know, the reason it's called Remake and Rebirth is because it's like a recreating or a reimagining. So yeah, and like there's other people that be like, oh, well, it can still be a sequel and a reimagining, but, you know, that's a stretch right there. When I say reimagining, I just mean like this is like I said, the compilations version of the OG events. Like, things are going to be obviously different. Like, characters like Yuffie and Vincent are not optional. Things are more enhanced and fleshed out. There's been all this lore that's been created for Final Fantasy VII since the original has released. They're incorporating that. There's stuff that happened before Final Fantasy VII before Crisis and Crisis Core. There's been like retcons with that, and like they acknowledge all the stuff from the past that happened within, like, you know, that compilation within Remake. And then like people say, like, what about this like Advent Children like references and stuff? It's like that's more like setting up for the future, you know what I mean? Like setting up for Advent Children, not like retelling it within Remake. And there's other quotes you'll see that that I'll get to, that like Advent Children was an inspiration for a Remake, like the visual style and all that. Like visually it is an inspiration, and like the devs like putting in like stuff that like visually is like identical to Advent Children is more of like an homage to like you know, like why they like had like the motivation they got to create this remake in the first place, because they wanted like a game that looked like Advent Children but it was like playable. And now here we are with a game that looks better than Advent Children and it's playable. Like in game, this shit looks better than Advent Children. But anyway, that's like the first line of quotes. I got a bunch of them to go through, and like I said, they're all randomized, so we'll just get to them as we get to them. I don't have any of this stuff organized, so, but you know, they're all going to lead to the same point in the end. But yeah, Shinra Archaeology Department, they do an awesome job translating a lot of articles and Ultimania sections. It's like they're really great. I would suggest following them if you want any translations on like anything Final Fantasy VII. They are my go-to, so go subscribe to them, or I mean follow them on Twitter or X, whatever. They have like nearly every interview, like every tidbit they can find, they translate it. So let's see. Nomura says that Zack is the key to the mystery they've worked into the remake project. He reiterates the main through line of the story will follow the original, but a new mystery will run parallel with it. And like that's just like saying like you know, this mystery is like not like overtaking the original story. It's just like something that's happening within that story. And like I'm pretty sure, you know, I don't even need to reiterate this stuff. Like, it's pretty well known since Rebirth has, you know, this is stuff I was interested in before Rebirth release, but we've played it, we realized this stuff. So moving on, Kitase says that FF7 Rebirth will follow the flow of the original story, remaining largely unchanged, but beyond that there will be parts that make you wonder. Just like in Remake, he thinks that in a sense they will be more prevalent in Rebirth, which that's on the table, because I feel like more people with Rebirth were, you know, like there's like, apparently I haven't looked around, but people are telling me that like more people are on the Reimagining train now than they were on the sequel train after playing Rebirth. I guess because a lot of people thought Aerith was going to survive at the end of the game, and some people probably still do because of the way that scene was portrayed, like through Cloud's trauma instead of actually seeing like what happened in through his eyes. But yeah, moving on. So what you are saying is that even though the FF7R project is portrayed differently than the original, what happens up until that point remains the same. Yes, exactly. It might give you a sense of uneasiness or foster doubt, so you might ask, why is Zack heading to Midgar with Cloud in Rebirth's trailer? Well, the answers will unfold as you play FF7 Rebirth, which, you know, I don't think a lot of those answers were, you know, like that really wasn't answered. But I mean, I guess the answer is they're in another world or dream world, or like, you know, we have like an idea that what those worlds are, but we don't really know. Nojima says, I'm sure that they had a lot of fun playing it, which is Remake, and might have doubts on what will happen from here on out, but please remember those doubts you had, since you'll probably find the answer in future installments. And like, that's, you know, probably just saying like people doubt like this is the OG story, or, you know, things like that. This was at the end of an Ultimania snipped out at the end of one of the interviews, but some of them are short, some are not. And then yeah, I went and saw Advent Children in theaters when it had its theater run, and you know, a lot of people were like, oh, there's gonna be this interview with you know, the developers like before Advent Children premieres, which there was, and a lot of people were expecting them to say like, oh, this is a sequel to Advent Children or something, but they said, well, I mean, I can go through the video after this, but basically they were like, you know, like Advent Children is a visual inspiration. They reiterated that it's a visual inspiration and like pretty much nothing more. And then Kitase goes on to say, timeline wise, Advent Children's story should be positioned as one just beyond the story within the Remake project. So like I said, going for a cohesive compilation here. This ReTrilogy is the cohesive version of the original with the compilation. So like, yeah, that's like pretty straightforward, but you know, like, you know, people are like bullshit and stuff like that. So I understand sometimes, you know, whatever, the devs say a lot of shit, right? But they have been consistent with saying this. So, and then here's some like more tidbits. So Rebirth creative director Nomura says that his role as scenario writer, Nojima, has set a goal of cleanly organizing once and for all the story of FF7, whose developments have been scattered across variant different series since the original game. And like, yeah, this is like pretty much what I was just saying, like yeah, cohesive version, Final Fantasy 7, or like the compilations version of Final Fantasy 7, one that's actually going to line up better with like what came before it, like before Crisis and Crisis Core, and now Ever Crisis, and or I guess at First Soldier, and then like the stuff that comes after with Advent Children and everything. It's going to set up for that. So it's acknowledging the past of the compilation, setting up the future, and it's also like including, like showing you what were these compilation characters doing within the story of the original. You know, like how does the lore from all that compilation stuff affect the original, and like, you know, make it depicted differently. It, like, you know, the degrading stuff wasn't there in the original, and all that other, you know, all the other stuff with like G cells and like, you know, those acknowledgments, like characters like Kyrie and Leslie, you know, they, like even stuff from Traces of Two Past, like in the novels, all that stuff was like incorporated into this. So moving forward, all right, this is just a comment of like people asked for Dirge of Cerberus remake. So Nomura says FF7 Rebirth can be used as a springboard to dive into the older titles, and if people are interested in seeing what happens next, they can play the later games in the FF7 series. It's a great entryway into the FF7 universe. So yeah, like they're saying, like, you know, he's like saying this in the after tense. There is another Dirge of Cerberus comment where he's like, you know, we'll only do this, like remake this after the Rebirth trilogy is completed, because it's like the opening of that movie is pretty much a spoiler for the ending of the original. So not saying that the ReTrilogy ending is going to be one for one with the original. There's probably going to be a new twist on it, and you know, it's going to be better depicted, and I think it's going to line up better with Advent Children than the OG did. But I do believe everything that was in the OG ending is still going to be there. It's just going to be greatly expanded upon. That's just my thoughts. But yeah, there it is. When asked if they'd remaster Dirge of Cerberus FF7, Nomura said that because the story takes place after FF7, they would first need to finish the remake. Since releasing Dirge of Cerberus in the middle would spoil the ending, they can only release it after the trilogy, never before. So take that as you will. But yeah, that's, you know, they don't want to spoil, you know, they don't want people playing like, you know, that, or like I know the argument is like, oh, then why they come out with Advent Children in theaters? Like, they're not forcing you to go see this stuff, you know, they're just like, that's more so for the people who already know, or if they wanted, like, you know, greater insight, I guess, on in the 7 universe. Like, it's just something they were doing, like, you know, it was like Final Fantasy VII is like hot right now, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, do it now or it's never gonna happen. Like, that's probably the only time that 7 is like, Advent Children's gonna be in the theaters like ever again. I mean, maybe, probably far in the future it will be, but like for now, it's like they were just striking while the iron was hot. But all right, let's see. While the pair are tight-lipped on what story changes to expect from Rebirth and the currently untitled 30 entry, Nomura reveals that Advent Children fans will be well catered for. If you play right through to the end, it will link up to Advent Children, so you don't need to worry about that. Says with a knowing smile. So, yeah, like a lot of people take that link up thing. There is going to be more to that interview, like expanding on what he means by link up. But yeah, like a lot of people took that link up as like, you know, oh, it already has linked up, and like, yeah, it's gonna link up as in it's a sequel. But like, when you say you don't need to worry about that, like, who was worried about, like, you know, like if it's not a sequel? Like, people were worried if it's not like an actual remake, you know what I mean? So this seems to like be like telling fans, like, don't worry, like, it's, you know, it's still gonna wind up like going into Advent Children. So it's not like overwriting the rest of the compilation. It's not some sequel after Advent Children and Dirge of Cerberus, further convoluting stuff, but I will let them explain it further. And that's where this comes in, and where they reiterate what they were talking about. We are finally going to link up with Advent Children. That is going to be part of the canon, Kitase confirms. The overall storyline, the developments will not go wildly out in a way that will not add up to Advent Children in the end. I don't think anyone wanted that. That's not what we're looking to create here. But to make sure it doesn't become stale and people know exactly where it's going, that it doesn't just follow the original word for word, we add in extra elements which add that little bit of doubt. Getting the right balance of that is so key. Ultimately, we're not trying to change the Final Fantasy VII story into something really different. The overall balance wouldn't really allow for that anyway. So yeah, he just lays it out on the table. Like, this is going to be going straight into Advent Children after the game is over. And it's like pretty much like, I mean, a lot of people can interpret this however they want. Like, this to me, like them like expanding on what they mean by link up, and even putting the words add up afterwards, and then going in to describe what they mean by that, and telling them like, hey, no one wanted like a sequel. That's not what we're looking to create here. Basically, like, they tell us they're going to make a remake. That's what they're going to do. And like, one of the first quotes they've ever said was like, when they showed the remake logo, they wanted to show when they showed it at 2015 for the first time, with the promise has been made, and then it shows remake at the end. It just says remake. They wanted to assure people that it wasn't a sequel or a side story, that it was an actual remake. So that's like, you know, something they said way back, like right when they first revealed the trailer. But people, you know, there were differences in the game, so it led them to believe like, hey, something's going on here. This is a sequel. Why is Sephiroth in here early, which we went over earlier. So yeah, that's just like confirmation to me, further confirmation, if that interview during the Advent Children premiere, like, well, not, you know, premiere, but like re-showing of it in theaters, like, that's just like more confirmation. And like they've just been, like, every chance they get, it seems like they're like saying the same thing. So, you know, they've been very consistent with that stuff. And yeah, there's the video on it. Yeah, all right. How does Advent Children connect to Rebirth? Fully present the visual expression of Advent Children in the original story of Final Fantasy VII. Yep, the visual inspiration. CG visuals, including the characters that originated from Advent Children, are connected to the remake project. So I think there is much in common there. Another thing is that in terms of the story, Advent Children itself depicts the world after the original FF7. But the remake project essentially also follows the major elements of the story of the original Final Fantasy VII. So timeline-wise, Advent Children's story should be positioned as one just beyond the story within the remake project. I think it would be very entertaining to play the FF7 remake series, remake and rebirth, while considering how the stories will be connected. And Ojiba said he wanted to try to connect all the spin-offs that have been released so far. We are currently working on that as a major assignment. That way, characters from all of the various spin-offs, including novels, will appear in this remake project, like I spoke about earlier. And I've said this before, they even had to reiterate this. The whispers that appeared at the end of the previous FF7 remake there are 3, and these 3 inspired by Advent Children will appear. All of these are not separate stories, but will in some way all be connected this time around. So, yeah, like, so, and basically, it's a visual inspiration, and they do have like lore stuff, like, you know, all the characters in the compilation coming in, and even when it comes to those 3, like, they're not like literally Lodge, Kadaj, and Yazoo. They're still like Sephiroth remnants. They're like in that spiritish whisper form. So that to me is like a setup for the future. It's not like saying, oh, this is the future, and it's like, you know, Advent Children already happened and stuff like that. I just take that as like they're setting, you know, they're acknowledging that future that's coming, basically. It's, you know, it's like acknowledging the past, setting up for the future. All right, now to get back into some more of these. Let's see. Thank you very much. After seeing the response when the game released, I felt real pride that the kind of remake we aimed for has been appreciated and improved by fans. Our aim was to deliver a game experience that felt both new and nostalgic at the same time, not jarring with people's fond memories of the original, but enhancing them, and expressed in the most modern way possible. We have received many comments from fans expressing their approval for this approach and saying that the approach we took to the remake resonated with them, and this has inspired confidence in all the little decisions we made to build up the game. We are hugely excited about development on the next game and making that something that will meet fans' expectations too, but it is important not to forget a sense of humility and that we can still learn a lot. Well, yeah, they are really on, like, you know, sticking, like, keeping all those original moments. Just a lot of reiteration. There were many things we learned from the reception of Remake since its release, but I feel that the response was especially great for the elements we remade while being cognizant to pay homage to the source material. and I recall players' reactions were very positive, says Naoki Hamaguchi. I don't want to limit it to just this title. I am reminded that for the next installment, it is of utmost importance not to damage the memories from the source material while reimagining it so it surpasses people's expectations. And this was him talking about like Remake 2 Rebirth. All right, next. We quickly decided that there were so many essential parts that fans would be upset if we had cut out anything from the original. At the beginning of the project, we had two directions we could go. The first was to make the project with the highest possible level of graphics, visual quality, and detail, and not remove anything that fans wanted to see. Instead, it would expand upon the original game to make something even more immersive. The other option was to include the entire scope of the original game in a single release, but in order to make that work as a modern game, we wouldn't be able to go for the highest visual quality, and we'd also have to cut back on areas and scenes from the original. Essentially, to make a single release viable, the resulting game would have ended up being a digest of the original story, and we didn't think that fans would be pleased with that. Ultimately, we decided the best option for the project was to go for the highest level possible with an expanded story. Having more than one game in the project allowed us to keep focus on keeping everything people loved from the original, but go into greater detail and more story depth than before. So yeah, this is just going out over like their decision to make it in parts, so they didn't have to cut anything out, so that like everything from the OG would be there. And like obviously like they're giving us everything from the OG and more, like they said, the expanded story. So there's that. Well, Hamaguchi-san says, to explain our philosophy, it really was a case of being respectful to the original game, and then what were the elements of the original that we had to reimagine to recreate, or to create a more immersive experience. Most of the additions to the story came from us trying to fill in the gaps from the original game, content that wasn't included in the original because we couldn't show it fully with the technology available. And they actually say that a lot too, about the technology not being there at the time, and they couldn't depict certain things, so that's different now, and that's what they're aiming to do. So all right, now Nomura says, since the stories are part of the compilation, Nojima-san and myself had plans for them to be included from the beginning. We thought that it would be natural for them to appear in that time and place within the story, so we decided to leave them there. In regards to what happens to them after the events in Remake, I recommend that players read the light novel Final Fantasy VII Turks, The Kids Are All Right. So yeah, like this was in response to like, hey, we saw Leslie and Kyrie in the game, like what are they doing here? And this is just more like I said, they're showing what these characters were doing during the original events of the story. Like, you know, expansion, and like, you know, that was like some lore that was introduced within like a novel, and they went back and, you know, like incorporated it into the original story. Like I said, compilations version of the original. They have to, like, you know, put the people they like, all this stuff they built up in the compilation is now within the original. So you're not going to be wondering like, oh, where are these characters that were here, like in these other things in the compilation, like where are they during the OG events? It's pretty much just explaining that. And he says like, yeah, if you want to know what they're doing after the events in the remake, read this novel right here, The Turks, The Kids Aren't All Right. So, and yeah, of course he says after, so, you know, another thing saying that like this is something that happens after. It's not, you know, like another thing like hinting towards it not being a sequel. But let's go further. Can we expect to see new elements in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that are taken from the compilation of Final Fantasy VII? I cannot reveal full details yet, but yes, there are many characters and details added to Rebirth that weren't fully or that weren't featured in the original Final Fantasy VII, but were seen in the compilation. And that's just, you know, reiterating what I just said. I cannot talk right now, but yeah, that's reiterating what I just said. So, and then Nojima's just you know, giving his insight to how he's like writing the story and like incorporating the compilation. So as for me, I knew that even though at the very core the story is about Cloud, talking about like, you know, the original Final Fantasy VII and the remake trilogy, works from the compilation of FF7 have greatly increased over the years, and I wanted to make something that takes all of those works and combine it into one. Each person who played the original version also has their own vision of the world of FF7, and I wanted to preserve that too. The results of those feelings are shown within the remake story. These were all the ideas I had, so in the beginning I would initially show it to Nomura-san, and I tried my best to explain them clearly to make sure he did not reject them. So yeah, just more reiteration about, like, you know, cohesive story, basically. Kitase, I can't give you full details exactly how many times, where they're referenced, or anything like that, but what I want to let you know is that all of the lore from the works created after the original game, the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, that's all very much in the base of the canon for the remake, and going forward it will be too. And this is a great quote too, because this is like literally what I've been saying, like that the OG, like how it's like a separate continuity to me, because all those compilation works, you know, like the games, the movie, the novels, all that stuff was created after Final Fantasy VII and introduced retcons, changes, like, you know, like crap like that, and it just didn't make it doesn't make sense if you go from Crisis Core to like OG to Advent Children. And I think it's going to make a lot more sense going from Crisis Core Reunion now to the Remake trilogy and then watching Advent Children. Like, I think that's going to make way more sense, cohesive, and, you know, it's not going to be off-putting. Like, characters aren't going to disappear because they're not in, you know, they're not in the OG game, and then they're going to reappear in Advent Children. Like, everything's just going to be connected. There's going to be connectivity. It's like, you know, Cissna's in the Remake trilogy, but she's not in you know, the original. It's just little stuff like that to make for a more cohesive experience. All right. Before the release of episode Intermission, it was unclear if the likes of Advent Children, Dirge of Cerberus, and the range of other Final Fantasy VII material was considered canonical in the Remake's universe. Toriyama-san confirmed that this is definitely the case, describing the Remake project as a coming together of sorts for over 20 years of adventures. I want to make it so that fans of the original game and different Final Fantasy VII universe titles can look forward to seeing how they all relate and join up with one another, while at the same time communicating how deep and amazing the world and characters of Final Fantasy VII are to newcomers who will not have seen any of them. Toriyama explains, Remake is based on the original, but is being made after all of those additions to the universe, so we want to take advantage of that and are planning it out as a sort of coming together of all the work set in the Final Fantasy VII universe to date. Once again, very good quote, like it literally giving you their intentions, like telling you exactly what they're doing with stuff like that. And like a lot of the sequel stuff, I feel like is just them like doing this, and it's, you know, and like makes some think it's a sequel. The thing that makes them think it's mostly a sequel is the newly introduced whispers, which were not present in the other works. Like, as far as I know, they were not. And they were introduced in Remake, so I guess if it wasn't for them, a lot of people wouldn't be questioning the sequel stuff. But yeah, that's like just like some mechanism they decided to make for Remake. And we still have to see how all of that plays out in the end. Could the whispers, like, you know, like I said, could it just be like last 10 minutes of part 3, like, aha, it's future Sephiroth coming back with the whispers, or some mechanism like that? Like, I'm not sure, but I think that would be very poorly done if they did it that way. But I am open to it, and I am open to like my mind being changed. Like, I think that's a poor way to do it, but maybe they could do it in some amazing way where I could be like, oh, I was completely wrong. But as of now, I don't like that idea. I just think the whispers are like a new like a mechanism to like make stuff from the OG take place. And that doesn't mean like, oh, they're forcing the OG to happen. It just means no matter what happens, even their inclusion has not stopped the OG from happening. It's actually led into those events happening. So yeah. And then Toriyama stresses they aren't making a completely different game, and when it comes to major characters and plot revelations, the team will draw the line to ensure core elements and iconic moments are accurately recreated. So just, you know, once again telling you every scene you remember from the original, that's all going to be there. And it's, you know, let's see. All right. Okay. Yep. I haven't read this one yet. I was just making sure. About compilation being intertwined, it's not to say that all or some of the characters from the spin-offs of the compilation works will appear in the remake, but there are any areas where we can use the settings or the characters. We do want to try to incorporate it in there. so it gives off that sense of nuance and those other stories existing. There may be instances where the characters appear themselves or are just referenced in dialogue, but of course it will be difficult to follow up on everything that happened in the universe, so maybe some of the characters who weren't as famous won't appear or be mentioned, but in terms of the characters and instances that remain in the memories of our fans, we do want to try our best to integrate that in some fashion in the world. So yeah, like, you know, things like the nuance of characters and other stories existing, that's like, you know, like exactly what they've been saying, but you know, that's like stuff like the Kadaj, Laz, and Yazoo stuff, like that's, you know, the sense of the nuance of that story, you know, that's like going to come into play at some point, you know what I mean, like in the future after Remake Trilogy. But I guess that's acknowledge the past, set up the future. Broken record. Our approach with this remake project was to reintroduce these characters and the world to both newcomers and existing fans. Essentially, we wanted to utilize the best of modern technology and storytelling to bring this world and the characters into the modern era of games. We've updated the original in a far more realistic and immersive way so that the excitement of the original game could be experienced by all audiences and be seen as something new, surprising, and innovative, rather than just a beloved game from the past. The compilation works were really designed with the audience to have knowledge of these characters and world already. For a remake, it's a chance for newcomers to enter this world, and everything they need to know is in this game. However, we didn't want to abandon the expanded storytelling from the compilation series, so there are many references to these titles throughout Remake. Our approach with the Remake project was to reintroduce these characters and the world to both newcomers and existing fans. So yeah. Like I said, a lot of this is like reiteration. Like, I'm just like pointing out how many times they've said the same thing over and over. But you know, like for some time, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, the devs, like they're being untruthful. They're trying to keep it a surprise or something that it's a sequel. But you know, they're just reiterating it so like the same message over and over, and then people keep, you know, thinking sequel. That is, you know, that's what, like, whatever. You know, like I said, I'm not gonna knock those people. Like I said, it is the most popular theory alongside reimagining. So let's see what this says. There are a lot of fans out there that have an interpretation of Remake and this trilogy being more of a sequel than a reimagining. What's your reaction to that? And what is it like making these games where everyone has different theories and thoughts about what's going on? So yeah, here we go, directly, straight up asking them. Hamaguchi says there are two main points that we took care of keeping intact for the Remake series. The first is, having had 20-something years pass since the original FF7, we now have the technology to be able to depict the game and the storyline in much more depth. So what we wanted to do was look back at the original, see what we could not show and represent back then, and put efforts into making this a reality. The second point is the original title is a work that has a ton of fans and it's very well-known storyline. So when you're working with a title like that, when you're implementing small changes along the way, I do believe that this evokes a sense of anxiety in a good way. Curiosity in players that might think, oh, I thought I knew this story, but something is a little different. If the path that the characters lead is the path the characters leave going to be different, it evokes that curiosity and wonder. And yeah, they want us to have that wonder. They like us theorizing this stuff. Like, it's not like, you know, like I said, I don't like mind the sequel theories. Like, a lot of people hate my theories. The theory I just put up there about the live stream sequence, like, you know, there's like a good chunk of people who think that's a terrible idea. Like having the world's reveal and the Zack death and Aerith death included in the live stream sequence. So like, you know, we all have our theories, like, you know, but like at the end of the day, us like theory crafters, we're just doing this out of curiosity and wonder and like what could be, not like what has to be. So like, you know, like I said, I don't knock anyone that like thinks it's going to be a sequel. I hope they don't knock me for thinking it's going to be a reimagining. Like, we're all just, you know, we're like going with like what our brains are leading us to. We're all, you know, we all have different opinions. We interpret things differently. And, you know, thank God we're not all robots thinking the same thing. I always say that. So I'm glad we all have different opinions and we can discuss, and we can pick each other's brains to see why we think the way that we do, like put each other in each other's shoes and try to see where they're coming from, things like that. But I think due to this point being effectively done throughout the series, there's a big reason why a lot of fans consider it to be a sequel and not a reconstruction. As for how it will play out, of course, we want players to see for themselves, but as far as the reactions that we're getting, it is as we expected, and we're happy to hear that. Yeah, like they want, like they said like earlier in some of these snippets, like they're trying to sow these seeds of doubt and like keep mystery. Like they want the mystery. They want us to wonder, like, you know, we know the story, but like we still like are getting wonder out of it. You know what I mean? Like that's awesome. That's like awesome that like we don't know, like, I mean, no matter what happens, like we're gonna hit those OG events, but like what's the journey itself, like how we get to those events, like I have no idea. And like I said, if it's gonna, like, it could wind up being a sequel in like the last 10 minutes of the game as well. Like, you know, like they could surprise us like that too. You never know. But they definitely want to invoke that sense of mystery and like have us discussing and, you know, wild theory crafting out here. That they love that, and it's also keeping interest in the game between releases. So anyway, and this was a part of this. It was just there was like an ad in between it, I believe, and I didn't want to include the ad in there. And yeah, see, I'm getting towards the end here. All right, could you tell us how Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is being made? The original Final Fantasy VII is designed so that the world suddenly opens up after leaving Midgar. Provided things unfold the same way with the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, do you plan to expand the world starting with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? Kitase says, as the project won't deviate significantly from the original game, the sensations players enjoyed are sure to be reproduced as well. Midgar took the form it did in Final Fantasy VII Remake as a result of us aiming to evolve things in a way that would satisfy players of the original game. Naturally, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has also been created with consideration to preserve fans' image of the original game. That's why these titles contain such an incredible volume of content. Boy, oh boy, did Rebirth contain an incredible volume of content. I truly can't wait. I think what fans of the original game are most eager to learn about after the recent announcement is Zack. Would you say Final Fantasy VII Rebirth story differs quite a lot from the originals? Kitase says the crux of the story hasn't changed. By providing new mysteries that differ from the original game, we hope to make the game fresh and enjoyable even to players of the original. On the other hand, there are parts where we've made some modifications to how the game progresses. Some players may on occasion wonder whether certain areas have been scrapped. This is due to a handful of alterations we've made to suit the game's structure as a trilogy. As such, the order in which you visit some places has been changed, but our basic policy has been to avoid eliminating things. So yeah, like I said, you know, and like even though like Rocketown and Wu-Tai-Wu, that's like this is like for the structure of it being a trilogy, and you know, like they said up there, like we're trying to keep it fresh and enjoyable even to us original players, which I think they've done a brilliant job doing, and they've left the mystery and the wonder. Brilliant. They've done a great job of that. So the same crux, you say? Final Fantasy VII Remake had the same crux as the original, yet ended up feeling like a different game, and it seems like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is all more poised to share a common crux, yet turn out to be a different game. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you why, rather than simply remaking the game using modern technology, you chose to steer the game in such a direction that it might be considered a different title, despite having the same crux. We are of course aware that some people might think it better to simply leave the original as is and make the presentation more beautiful without changing anything else. However, if that had been the scope, I don't think we would have been able to invest as much in creating it as we have. Back when we first got the project off the ground, we wanted to make sure that even people who played the original game could enjoy new experiences and new narrative developments through its content. That was the task we had to tackle. And like, yeah, they've done a great job of that. I mean, yeah, well, there's like the whispers, those are hit or miss for a lot of people, but like, you know, like something like a new narrative development is like Cloud, being like Cloud's trauma scene, like during Aerith's death, how like he's like blocking that stuff out. That's a new narrative development that needs to be addressed at some point. So we're gonna see that original scene play out, and like, you know, they're showing the story but in a different way. So it's really awesome, and like, you know, they're doing a great job of what they're aiming and set out to do. So new experiences and new narrative developments. Why is that? When you once again play through the mystery of Nibelheim, which is the single most important part of the original game. Okay, and like this is what he means by crux as well, because like the mystery of Nibelheim, when you're going through the live stream sequence, that is the crux of the original game. So Players will get impatient saying, yeah, I already know all this. In short, the game would only reconfirm the same plot point. Launching such a large project based on that sort of paltry payoff and that gameplay experience would have been difficult. That said, if the story were to change entirely and become something completely different, it would lack any significance. The challenge we've undertaken with this project is introducing new mysteries without straying from the original. So yeah, they're like, this is basically like talking about that live stream sequence and like how there is going to be new mysteries in there without straying from the original. So yeah, like everything, like to me, this means everything from the original live stream sequence is like going to be in there, but they're also going to like address the new mysteries in there. Like the big mystery now isn't like, oh, Cloud wasn't in Soldier, like he was just a Shinra grunt, and you know, like new players coming in, like not playing an OG or anything, they're gonna get like two mysteries. They're gonna get the mystery in that scene of, yeah, Cloud was never in Soldier, and then on top of that, they're gonna get all the new mysteries that like us OG fans who like know that mystery. Like we're gonna get something like for the other mysteries, like with what's going on with Zack, what's going on with Aerith, like and like the worlds, like what are those dream worlds, and like that's how it's all going to tie and connect together. So that's why, like in my other theory video to bring it up, like that's why, like another reason why I think that that's like Aerith's death and Zack's death and like what's happening with the worlds, all that stuff is going to be showcased within that live stream sequence as well, because those are the new mysteries that have been set up. Like, so that's like something they need to solve, and it seems like, you know, they're going to solve it. If not in this live stream sequence, I don't understand where, because that is where those payoffs happen. So like, and you learn the truth, and basing a whole sequence around that plot point, like I said, it could have everything from the original and add that stuff. Well, that's what leads me to believe that. But get out of this. And yeah. Yep. Well, like I said, this is like just falling in line. Like they've just been reiterating Reimagining, like putting the compilation works in, like, you know, expanding the story, trying to create wonder and mystery, keep fans guessing, keep us theorizing, keep us having fun in between these releases. And like, you know, I know that the argument is going to be like, well, what about Sephiroth? And like, he seems to know a lot. And I'll just say about that like, you know, he's supposed to, like, this Sephiroth during OG has like traversed a live stream. He's like all-knowing, like he's basically like a freaking demigod right now. He's like cannot dissolve in the live stream because he's like, so, you know, yeah, he has that Genova in him. We get that explained to us when we're in the Temple of the Ancients with the Ancient War. And like, you know, the Gi could not return to the planet, and neither could Genova. So it like lies dormant. Like basically Genova cannot die because the life stream does not accept it. And like, you know, like Sephiroth, like his spirit is like, you know, it's like roaming around, but it's not like within, like it's like on the bounds of the live stream or something, or he's like living vicariously through like Cloud because he's like attached to him on a cellular level. But like, yeah, either way, he cannot be accepted into the live stream. And like he's like omnipresent, or like whatever you want to call it, just like, I mean, Aerith might be that as well. And like him knowing everything, like he is supposed to be all-knowing, like I said. So if he has like every knowledge of everything, even like some future events and stuff like that, like having children, it doesn't mean really anything, because part of the story of the OG, it will like introduce more on the way to a smile, is that like when Sephiroth is like you know, Meteor is like clashing with Holy in like the live stream, and like Meteor is losing, Sephiroth uses all of his memories and his knowledge to reinforce Meteor, and he does it so much to the point where he forgets what he even looks like. And that's why Laz, or wait, I'm trying to remember their names now. Yaz and Kadaj? No, Yazoo. Laz, Yazoo, and Kadaj. Sorry. Laz, Yazoo, and Kadaj. Like, they only exist as like Sephiroth's remnants, and each are like a part of his personality. And you know, like they are sent out, like they're basically like, you know, splinters of Sephiroth, remnants of his, because he can't remember his full appearance. He needs Cloud's memory, some Genova, and like, you know, obviously like someone to foil himself over, like Kadaj, which he does. So it's not ridiculous that he's like all knowing, because he's going to lose those memories in the end. And you know, nothing he's done has shown me that he's that like looking into the future. And even if he can say so, Aerith can also do the same, and they're playing a chess game, and like their chess game is like leading into the events of the OG. Every time Sephiroth makes a move, she counters it. And like, you know, it's not like just Sephiroth like going unopposed. If it was him going unopposed, Advent Children wouldn't happen. If it was Aerith going unopposed, Advent Children wouldn't happen. It's the battle between those two, battle between light and dark, and now we got light and dark whispers. Like, it's just that light versus dark thing, and the outcome of that is what fate is, you know. So like, fate is the outcome of this battle between good and evil, and I believe that fate is just going to be, you know, pretty much the end of OG7 and then leading into Advent Children and all that stuff. So that's where I like believe that's going. And I know, like I said, the whispers, like in the first remake, I understand why like you would think it was a sequel, and like, you know, we're destroying fate and things like that. But you know, Red 13th asks like questions like, is it our destiny to like defy destiny? And like the answer to that is seemingly yes. Like, we were meant to defy that destiny. Like, that was our destiny. So like, even defying destiny was our destiny, because it led to the OG events still. And everything in Rebirth led to the OG events, and I think everything in Part 3 is going to lead to the OG events. But like I said, they could spin some last minute twist on the ending. I think the ending is going to be expanded like indefinitely. But like what it's going to include, if it's like going to include some aha gotcha moment in the last 10 minutes of the ending where Sephiroth is from the future or something and Advent Children's erased, you know, that remains to be seen. And I think that would be very not well executed at this point to do it that way. But I mean, everyone has different ideas on good execution. But like, yeah, I've just been like, you know, I've been reading these interviews over the course of the years that like, you know, in between Remake and Rebirth, and not so much after Rebirth. I guess I'll go hunting for some interviews now and see if anything else substantial was said after this video. I'll just go hunt down on my own. But everything is just lining up, like it's like lining up to what they said it's going to be. And I know a lot of people are still like, they're tricking us. It's actually like a sequel or a requel, but I'm not one of the people that subscribe to that theory. Just everything I've played has and seen and read from the developers, like even without reading their stuff, like the game is showing me that like no matter what has happened, what is newly introduced, what is different, everything still winds up falling in line with the OG's offense. So like I said, if it was a sequel, it's doing a bad job at it, but if it's a reimagining, it's doing an excellent job. So I would like to believe that it's a reimagining. And with that, like, I guess I shall bid you guys farewell until the next time I come up with any substantial things on this theory. But for now, like, I just wanted to go over some of the things I've already collected, make a video on it, get it out there, because there are a lot of videos on, you know, it being a sequel, and like the theory that it's a sequel, I should say, and not a lot of theories, videos on how it's not a sequel, how it's actually just a reimagining. And it's just, like I said, the compilations version of the original Final Fantasy VII that like acknowledges the past, like First Soldier, before Crisis Core, and it sets up for the future, like with Advent Children and Dirge of Cerberus, and like the novels too, On the Way to a Smile, Kids Aren't Alright. And like, yeah, Remake Trilogy has like, you know, where those characters from those compilation titles are during those OG events. We got stuff from Traces of Two Past, you know, like intertwined in there as well. So like, they're just, you know, it's a big like combination of lore. It's a big lore fest, and like they said, a culmination of all that lore over the years. And I think they're doing an amazing job at it. I can't wait to see what happens with Part 3. And if it does wind up being a sequel, that would be a huge surprise to me. But I will not say that I couldn't come around to the idea that it wouldn't be terrible, because I'm not the hugest fan of Advent Children, but I don't necessarily hate it either, and I hate convolution more than I hate Advent Children, so we'll just put it that way. But I would enjoy it if you could go from like First Soldier all the way to Dirge of Cerberus in a nice consistent manner that made sense, and everything connected together, unlike the OG being in the middle of all of it, which I said I view as a separate continuity, its own continuity. It's a masterpiece on its own. It doesn't need any of that other lore or anything. It's a self-contained experience that's perfect, and I just think this game can be perfect on its own. And if you want to go play those other compilation titles or read the books or watch the movie, they are okay to me. But like with this remake trilogy, it's only going to enhance them and make them better than okay, and make you actually want to go through and experience them. So with that said, I will finally bid you guys farewell, and thank you for coming into my video. I appreciate it. And you guys can like and subscribe. I'm going to be continuing the theories, going to have playthroughs coming, and I really appreciate all the support. You guys have a good evening. Catch you later. Nostalgiaverse out.